Good. Good day, everyone. Another great interview here. This is one I know I've had a lot of messages about, and everyone loves their sleep, and unfortunately sometimes we don't all get the quality that we'd like to get. So today I have Breege here from the only insomnia clinic that actually exists in Ireland. So Breege, welcome, and thanks for being part of Brain Health Week. It's great to have you on board. Would you like to just tell us a little bit about your work and your clinic in particular?
Okay, hi Catherine, lovely to be here. Okay, so I'm a sleep physiologist. There's not too many of me. I started about 15 years ago, because people always ask, how did you get into sleep? And I suppose I got lucky. I started off with a degree in science, worked in a lab for a little while, realized this is not really for me, and I got the opportunity to get involved in the neurology department in the Mater Private Hospital.
Great.
At that time, and this was to train as well, so I had going to college was part and parcel of that as well, so you were basically training on site with college in between. And I suppose I got very lucky because there was a brilliant lady there, consultant, who was the only sleep disorders consultant in the country, a Dr. Catherine Crowe. And she was attached to, it was a multidisciplinary department in the Mater Private. So you had neurology, you had sleep lab, and you had respiratory as well. So I suppose for my very first day there, I got stuck into the sleep lab work of it, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was just, there was so much to learn about it. So yeah. I then went off after all my college. I went off and did my professional exams in sleep. And I suppose I'm still kind of doing exams in sleep. It's ongoing.
You're still learning, like yeah, all of us.
I suppose when I started, I mean, a lot of my friends would have been going into maybe nursing, and they were like, "You're going into sleep. You'll never get a job in that. Like, you're so silly." But I suppose sleep is such a new area of medicine. I mean, they've only really started looking at sleep, I think, in 1968. I think they started to look at different stages of sleep. So we're constantly learning, and yes, we do know a lot, but there's so much more we have to learn, and we're constantly learning. I suppose that's what I love about it. I suppose then I worked there for years and years, and I went off then, and I went to the Bonds course, and then I came back then to the Mater, and I just left there a year ago because I suppose I was very lucky. I was exposed to all the different sleep disorders when I was in the Mater Private, and there's over 80 sleep disorders. So we saw all the strange and wonderful things that people get up to when they should be asleep, and they are still asleep. So, but the one type of person that we very, very, very seldom got into the sleep lab was an insomniac.
Okay.
Because having an overnight sleep study is not indicated for the diagnosis of insomnia. And insomnia is the most common sleep disorder there is. Like 15% of us, and that's probably estimated, suffer from insomnia. But yet there was nothing we could do. We couldn't treat these people because there was nothing available. I suppose in the older days it was just the sleeping medication. And that really is not the way to go long term. And there's more studies coming out and saying, look, that's established now. That's not the way to go. But yet it was like, well, we're meant the kind of the gold standard lab here, but we're not treating these. So I suppose I went to a lot of the kind of conferences and stuff I'd have gone to would have been in the UK, because they're way ahead of us. But I saw a talk on a professor, Colin Espy, and he was talking about this thing called cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia.
Yeah, I love
it. It's got a success rate of over 80%. So I was like, well, why aren't we just doing this? So then I went off and I got trained up in that, and hence how the insomnia clinic started.
Okay, so that's interesting in terms of I love CBT, and I would talk about CBT a lot when it comes to anxiety, because it's a very practical tool and so forth. Yes. So that's really interesting. We'll talk a bit more about that. I guess like anything with CBT, you can tailor it to any kind of issue in your life. So
exactly, yes, yeah. And especially when it comes to sleep, now they're seeing how CBT can be used. Originally It was just with the insomnia, but now they're using it right across the board. They're looking at it with adherence to CPAP for obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. We're looking at the kind of the sleepwalk and the parasomnias, you know, all of this. So
Wow.
CBT is really starting to kind of
that's
into the sleep disorders medicine. Yeah.
That's great. God, because we certainly need, like you said, it's definitely an emerging field of research, and I think we're constantly seeing, you know, that research on kind of probably on a weekly basis. There's more good news coming out in terms of the progress in relation to sleep. I guess, Breege, one of the big things that I would be aware of, and again talk about a lot, is the issues that we can all have as we get older when it comes to sleep. And obviously, you know, given we're in the middle of Brain Health Week, there's a huge connection, and I'm not, because I'm so aware of it, I often wonder, is everybody else aware of it? The connection between disturbed, interrupted sleep and a potential risk of Alzheimer's and dementia is very, very high. Is that something that you would be familiar with or work with?
Yeah, I mean, the two kind of go hand in hand, because remember, one of the major reasons why we sleep is for the body to repair itself. But also we think that the brain kind of like flushes out all this kind of waste products while we sleep within the brain. And when you think about the whole center for sleep is located in the brain. It's this whole circadian rhythm that basically determines this whole sleep-wake cycle. That's located in a place called the suprachiasmatic nuclei within the brain. So that's where the whole master clock. So if there's a problem with the brain, there's going to be a problem with sleep. And we also know that if you're not getting good quality sleep, that can lead to problems, to neurological problems. I look, even after one night of poor sleep, our short-term memory is going to be affected the next day. So the way we kind of consolidate memories, that all happens when we sleep as well. I'd also say, and it's not just like you're okay, the Alzheimer's, yes, but also all the neurological disorders has really kind of a huge, all has some kind of an impact on our sleep. Things like the Parkinson's, and even with Parkinson's, there's a disorder called REM behavior disorder, and that can be an indicator that the person might go on to develop Parkinson's. And what that is when we sleep, and when we go into dream sleep, we completely lose our muscle tone.
Just on before we go into that, because I'm just aware, you know, a lot of people mightn't just be aware of the circadian rhythm. Do you want to just talk us a little bit about that in terms of the different stages?
So basically, our sleep-wake cycle is determined by two kind of processes. The first process is what we call a homeostatic drive. And that means a sleep pressure. The longer we're awake, the more we need sleep. So as our wakefulness progresses, this ability to fall asleep quickly is going to start increasing. So basically, the longer you're awake, the more you're going to need sleep, okay? And then the second process is this circadian rhythm. And that's this internal body clock. And that basically means that all living follow some kind of a pattern. Our pattern is just over 24 hours long. So that basically means that different physiological occurrences happen within that 24 hours. So it's not just nighttime and daytime. It's this 24-hour rhythm, okay? And it's a 7-day week. So this basically rhythm determines when we wake and when we sleep. And we are built to sleep when it's dark and be awake when it's bright. But this rhythm can be interrupted. Usually by our environment, and most like a major kind of influence on this sleep-wake cycle is light. But also if there are neurological problems, that's going to affect this whole circadian rhythm as well. But for majority of people, it's this kind of the external factors that may kind of push this rhythm out of sync. So that's basically what happens. And it's our sleep is a very, very organized process. And if we have normal sleep, we have different stages of sleep that we go through. And again, that's by looking at brain activity, because that's the only way we can determine whether we're actually asleep or not, is by looking at your brain activity.
Yeah.
If you're awake and you're alert, you have very fast electrical activity within your brain. But even as you start to feel drowsy, that'll actually start to slow down. So when we're feeling sleepy, and it usually takes us about, the normal latency to sleep is about 20 minutes. So you should be sleeping about roughly 20 minutes.
And that's
In
when
between that,
you go into your light sleep then.
that's very light stage of sleep. And that's we'd only need about maybe 5% of our night's sleep should be made up of that, because it's literally just that bridge between being awake and asleep. You know, where you're getting that sensation that you might be falling, you might get a little jump.
Yeah.
And really you don't know whether you're awake or asleep, because there can be little bits of wakefulness in between that as well, you know. But only a small portion of the night should be made up of that, because it's pretty useless. Then pretty quickly we go into what we call stage 2 sleep. Brain activity slows down another bit, and there's different characteristics that would have for somebody analysing sleep. And about half of our night will be made up of that stage 2 sleep. About an hour after we've initially fallen asleep, then we go into a really, really deep stage of sleep. So the brain activity is really slow. But this is actually a really important stage of sleep, because this is where the whole repair happens. Cells regenerate, muscles recuperate, a lot of hormones may be secreted. So things like growth hormone will be produced in that. So that's the really good quality stuff. That's the stuff that makes us feel really refreshed the next day. Then the next stage of sleep, what happens then is the brain activity is going to really speed up again. And this happens maybe about 90 minutes after we've initially fallen asleep. Your brain activity looks pretty much like you're awake, but obviously you're not awake. And there's a couple of very distinct changes that happen to the body. So your heart rate can become a little bit more erratic. So sometimes if you wake up feeling and your heart is absolutely thumping, you may have woken up from this, what we call rapid eye movement or dream sleep. Our muscles become completely paralyzed. That's the major difference that really happens in this REM period. So muscles become completely, we can't move, you know. The only two sets of muscles that continue to work are respiratory muscles, because we're going to continue to breathe, and these eye muscles, because we have these rapid eye movements. And that's a whole cycle of sleep done with. So the cycles of sleep go to maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then what happens is the whole thing starts to repeat itself. So we have several cycles of sleep during the night. Bearing in mind, we should be getting the majority of that deep sleep in the first third of the night. We tend not to get any at the latter end of the night. The dream cycles get longer as the night progresses. So we usually have the longest dream cycle before we wake up. And it is completely normal to have little awakenings, particularly towards the latter end of the night. Nobody sleeps 100% of the time that we're in bed. We don't need to. So those awakenings that you would have coming towards the morning time, absolutely perfectly normal. But if you find that you're getting back to sleep and you're not really remembering them, they're not really bothering you, I wouldn't panic about it. But how that pattern looks is really going to determine how you function the next day.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, if you take any of us, if we've disturbed sleep, I mean, my God, we're not firing in all cylinders the next day, right? Because your body hasn't had a chance to repair. And I think even with COVID, we've probably seen it flashed all over kind of social media and so forth, for our immune system, the power of sleep.
Exactly.
When you talk about the cycles there, and this is one thing that I am beginning to see a lot of. So I have a Garmin, okay? I never wear it to bed, okay? I trialed it for about a week. It drove me nuts. I didn't like having it in bed anyway, but what drove me nuts was I was trying it because a lot of people had said to me, "Oh, Catherine, you know, when I check my Fitbit or my Garmin, it says I've only had 6 hours sleep, and it says this and that and the other." And I was like, "Listen, just please don't go there." So, but anyway, so I tried it myself for a week, and I actually found exactly that you'd be thinking, you know, it's telling you that actually you've only slept for 6 hours, and I'm like, no, I know I slept for 8 hours, because I'd be very good to go to bed early and stuff like that. But a lot of people fall into the trap, and this is what I actually think this is really, really just not good, in terms of literally before they get out of bed, they check the watch, they check the phone, and it's literally the phone tells them how they feel by virtue of how much sleep they've had. So they look and say, oh God, I only had 6 hours. Oh God, I'm wrecked. And whereas I'm actually saying, just please don't. I think that's something we'll talk about, sleep hygiene, in a minute, but I think we have to be very, very careful with that, because I saw, when I wore it for a week to try it, I saw the pitfalls in terms of it definitely wasn't accurate. And you know, accurate for running, yes. For sleeping, I'm not 100% sure. You know, others might think differently, but you know, I think you've got to look at your body yourself. Don't look at your phone, don't look at your watch to tell you how you slept, right?
I agree 100% with you. This is exactly, I mean, everything you've described is the way I think, because, you know, I know that the science there, the science doesn't back up this, you know, that they're not, even the makers of these gadgets themselves will say these are not validated for analysing sleep. You take them as a little bit of entertainment. To be honest, I wouldn't entertain it at all, you know, in terms of sleep. A lot of these devices are looking at basically how much you toss and turn, or movement levels during the night. And remember, we all move around during the night. But also, if you have a dead partner, they're picking up their movements as well. And they all tend to underestimate. And particularly the hours, it can't tell how many hours of sleep. You could be lying there nice and relaxed, and it might take it that you're asleep, and you may not be asleep. They're not accurate. They're not validated for sleep. And I suppose even, and the phone apps are another one. They will say, and I've tried them myself as well, you know, saying, oh, you got this much deep sleep, you got this much dream sleep. I'm sorry, it can't tell you. It's rubbish. But yet, you see, it's not really going to have much of an impact on your sleep. Probably a good sleeper. But if you're a poor sleeper and you look at this stuff, you're already obsessed with your sleep. So now you're adding in another obsession. And I know come maybe January, I always get a load more phone calls of people ringing me up, and they're after getting the Fitbit or whatever for Christmas. And now they're saying, oh, my Fitbit is telling me I'm only getting about 5 hours sleep a night, so I need to come to see you. And I'm like, well, you have no symptoms of insomnia, so you're absolutely fine. But people are more likely to just look at this little gadget. And I know we also use kind of things similar to this. They're called Acti watches, but they're medical grade devices like these ones. But people are still more likely to believe the thing on their arm than the actual medical grade device. It's like, no, my Fitbit is telling me, or, you know, it's like, well, how do you feel? And then they feel really refreshed. But because this little device is telling them, no, you slept badly, they say, okay, well, I have to feel bad because it's telling me you slept badly.
So tell us,
forget about it.
So talk to us then about sleep hygiene, in terms of, so, you know, there will definitely be people watching here who are having issues with sleep. So, you know, let's talk about the sleep hygiene, and then what I'd also like to touch on, you know, for maybe someone who wants to make sure that they're getting the best night's sleep, you know, what's the route to go. But so sleep hygiene.
Sleep hygiene are good sleep habits. They're behaviours that can help us sleep better. Okay, and I suppose the thing about sleep hygiene is, I have kind of a love-hate with it at the minute. Sleep hygiene is important, but I go through the kind of the good things that we should be doing, where they are important, but it's the stuff we should all be doing, not just good sleepers or bad sleepers. But majority of people that come to see me in clinic that have really chronic insomnia have really good sleep hygiene. They're doing all of the right things. But that kind of nearly adds to the frustration, because we have to remember, and we have to get away from the idea that sleep hygiene will not fix a chronic insomnia problem or any sleep problem. it's part of a whole kind of program of treatment, and it's only a tiny piece of that treatment. But I think when people see me from talking to them in clinic, they're saying, look, and the first thing they'll say to me is, Breege, I'm doing everything I should be doing. I've tried everything, but nothing is working. So there must be something really wrong with me because I'm still not sleeping. And the first thing I'd say is, well, you know, what have you tried? And they'll give me a list of things that they've done. And I said, you know, I've completely cut out caffeine from my diet. I go to bed at the same time every night. I don't look at the screens, the smart screens, you know, before bedtime, but I'm still not sleeping. I'm like, yeah, but they're just some of the things. I mean, you haven't tried the one thing that is actually going to fix the problem and is evidence-based, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy. But I suppose sleep hygiene is important. So things like, I suppose the first thing that we need to do is routine. The body absolutely thrives on routine. And when we have a problem with sleep, and particularly insomnia, this circadian rhythm, it becomes out of sync. That's what happens with insomnia. And basically you don't know whether it's day or night. So you have to try to send signals to the body to give it back some sense of time. So routine throughout that 24-hour cycle. If you don't have routine during your day, you can't suddenly put your head in the pillow and expect to have a nice routine sleep. So you get up at the same time every morning. That is so, so important. Your get up time is far more important than your go to bed time. Your get up time is what stabilizes the body clock.
And so why is that more important than the time you go to bed? I would have thought the time you go to bed would be more important.
That's what everybody thinks. If I have, and I see it from people coming into clinic, because I get them to keep sleep diaries, and they always have a lovely routine of going to bed. But then the get up time can be all over the place. But really, we shouldn't judge our going to bed time by what time of night it is. We should really, our biggest trigger or signal for knowing when it's bedtime is when we feel sleepy. After a certain time. So you can't make yourself sleep and fall asleep if you're not feeling sleepy. But if you start at the get up time, you'll probably find that as time goes by, you'll start to feel sleepy at roughly the same time every night. So you start at your get up time and you work backwards, not the opposite way.
And Breege, sorry, that's really interesting, because I found in the first few weeks of COVID that, you know, the kids we weren't getting up as early for school. We normally have gotten up about at 7 o'clock. So everything started to shift. And I found until I kind of looked at what was happening, I found kind of the second week in, I was sleeping till after 8 o'clock. And I just found when I got up, I was very groggy. I just wasn't as awake as quickly as I could be.
Well, there is the whole night owl or the morning lark. So it's finding out where you fall within that circadian rhythm. You know, it depends, and it also depends. Everyone is individual on how much sleep they actually need as well. So sometimes, if you're what we call, if this kind of the grogginess, that's what we call kind of like sleep drunkenness or sleep inertia. If you may have been, particularly if you wake up from a deep stage of sleep, you will feel a bit groggy, you know, and sometimes you can oversleep a little bit as well, you know, and it's finding out the amount of sleep you need on a consistent basis that you wake up, you feel relatively refreshed and you're not feeling sleepy during the day, you know, so it's finding out what you need and what is are you a night owl, are you a morning lark? So it's about finding out.
I'm a morning lark, that's for sure. One of my sisters,
and that's why,
a complete night owl. She's unbelievable. I wouldn't be. And so tell me this now. Does that mean then, you know, we're all very well? We can be fond of the weekend lie-on. I've young kids. It doesn't really happen, but. Is that something then that we should look at and try to avoid, to try and keep at the same wake up time every day?
Most definitely. And the guidelines for good sleepers is an extra hour at the weekend. Because what you're doing, say for example, I get up every morning at 6 o'clock, okay? Then, come the weekend, I'm probably a little bit sleep deprived. I think, great, it's the weekend. Now I can catch up on my sleep. And you might sleep in to maybe 9 o'clock. or even maybe 10 o'clock. You say, okay, that's not too bad. You know, I'm still, you know, relatively early day ahead of me. What you'll probably find then is you are probably finding a little bit more difficult to fall asleep on the Sunday night, and you're absolutely exhausted on the Monday morning.
Yeah, very true.
What you have done is you've shifted your body clock by nearly 3-4 hours. And when it comes to sleep, it can't cope with change. It hates change. It loves routine and consistency. So that's what we call actually social jet lag. You're experiencing exactly the same effects as jet lag, but without the nice foreign holiday to go with it. So, and for in terms of jet lag, for every hour of a time zone you travel, it takes the body a day to recover.
Okay.
So your 3 hour, so it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, by the time your body clock is kind of shifted back into place, and look, you're nearly back into the weekend again, and it's going to happen all over again.
It's just as well none of us can go anywhere this year then.
I know. It's, as I say about sleep, look, when it comes to sleep, there is no weekend. It's a 7-day pattern. You know, every day should be the same. It's just, and this is why when we start to have sleep problems, this whole circadian rhythm gets knocked out. And that it just becomes completely unbalanced, and that's how we feel. The side effects is like a constant state of jet lag, you know, the grogginess, the poor motivation, the poor concentration levels, poor short-term memory, all of that is part of this whole rhythm. The body thrives on routine.
Yeah, okay. And just going back to, and I know sleep hygiene is such an overused word, you know, and it you know, I think we know that it won't fix the problem, but in terms of setting yourself up, then you know, it is that the awake time, the sleep time. I guess for me, I always kind of say I personally, you know, benefit from a dark room. You know, it kind of gives me, you know, I guess it's the melatonin as well, the secretion and so forth. And I'm a big one on no phones in the bedroom ever.
Yeah. And this is where sleep hygiene is important. Like, you know, I'm not completely dissing it, you know. So the regularity, the get up time, regular meal times during the day, it's all about giving the body a sense of time. So if our meals are all over the day, that's taken away our sense of time. So ideally then we have to have this wind down time. So we've a very kind of a structured day during our wakeful hours, but then we have to kind of allow the body to switch over and to go into some kind of a wind down mode. And it's to bring down the levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone as well. So ideally, this kind of pre-ritual before sleep in preparation for sleep. So the light levels are hugely important. So again, go back to the wake up time, bright light upon awakening is really important, okay? Keep the light as bright as possible until about 2 hours before bed. And then what you do is you start to bring down the level of light about 2 hours before bed, okay? This is where we fall into the mistake in the winter time. You might come in from work at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening and automatically go into the kind of the low level light. But you're now sending the signal to your body it's 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening that it should need to start to thinking about making melatonin. So it's about, again, having this kind of, given these cues or signals to the body in order to give it a sense of time.
So that's, sorry, Breege, is that why then in December and January when we come home and if there's a fire going, we're all feeling drowsy?
Yeah, well, we're giving the body all these signals, and light is the biggest signal to the body to sleep. So if you've low level light, you're sending a signal. Your melatonin, remember, we only produce melatonin when it's dark. Melatonin is not time dependent. It's lack of light dependent. So if you're sitting up at 12 midnight or 1 a.m. and you're sitting with a really, really bright light, you're not going to be producing melatonin. And that's a signal to your body to stay awake, you know. So by manipulating the light levels is hugely important. Bringing down the level of light, turning off all smart devices. Blue light, we now know, and that's kind of a proven fact that it does reduce the production of melatonin. Just completely wind down, you know. do a bit of reading, watch a bit of telly, do whatever you want to do to relax before bed, to prepare the body and the mind for sleep. Because we have to, you can't go from being busy, finishing the bit of work on the laptop, doing all the little jobs around the kitchen, and bang, into bed, lights out. Doesn't work like that. And even if you do get off to sleep quickly, you may not stay asleep.
Yeah.
Because that's also a symptom of a disorder as well, you know. And people say, but I get to sleep okay. I was like, yeah, you get off sleep okay, but you're not staying asleep. So, you know.
And
So
that not staying asleep, like that interrupted sleep. So what can it, is it a matter of following the steps that, you know, you've mentioned in terms of trying to ensure that you don't have that interrupted sleep?
yeah, I mean, when people start to have a problem with sleep, and particularly again insomnia, they're not sleeping, they're not getting a huge amount of sleep. So what they start to do is they start to increase their time in bed. So they might start to go to bed a little bit earlier or get up a little bit later, because they think, well, the longer I'm in bed, the more likely I am to get more sleep. But in fact, it's having the opposite effect. It's breaking down the connection between bed and sleep. So ideally what you need to be doing, you need to be sleeping in bed roughly you need to be asleep for roughly 80-90% of the time that you're actually in bed. That's a thing what we call sleep efficiency. So if you find that sleep efficiency,
okay.
So if you're finding that you're in bed for maybe 8 hours, but only asleep for 4 of it, you've poor sleep efficiency.
Okay.
So the first thing I would say is, if you find that you're lying in bed for longer than half an hour or so, and sleep is just not happening, the first thing you need to do is make sure you don't look at the clock, okay? Because once you see the time, now the panic sets in, or you're under pressure. Oh my God, you know, it's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I have to get up for work in the morning. I have to sleep. It's not happening, because now you're stressed. You know, you're frustrated. You don't look at the clock. Certainly don't be looking at your phone. I wouldn't read in bed either. You can read in bed if you read, I don't know, for less than 20 minutes and you're sound asleep. That's absolutely fine. But if you find you're reading for an hour, 2 hours, I'd ban the book from the bedroom. And the best thing to do, because the longer you lie there, the more likely sleep is not going to happen, because you're frustrated, stress hormones increased, you're just fed up with the whole thing. The best thing you can do is just get up, get out of bed, leave the bedroom, go off, nice dim lit room, no clock, read a bit of a book, do whatever you want to relax, and only go back to bed when you're sleepy.
Okay.
A lot of the time when we have a problem with sleep, and particularly with insomnia, you lose your ability to feel sleepy. You don't know what it's like to feel sleepy anymore.
Right. Okay. And I guess the added complication, I'm again, you know, thinking of many of the viewers here, which I know is a mixed audience, but so where you have women who are suffering hot flushes and night sweats, this becomes such a bigger issue in terms of, you know, trying to navigate through all of that. You know, that physical side of it, plus then the compounded with the sleep. Would you say, I mean, I talk about, and you know, there's a lot to do in terms of the clothing in bed and so forth when it comes to night sweats, because that's a really key part of it. But would you also say in that case to, you know, go to a room with a dim lit light and read for a little bit, or you know, because I would generally say, you know, if someone's had a very excessive night sweat, you know, change their night dress, and if possible, you know, hop straight back into bed. They might go to the toilet or so forth. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, menopause makes a huge impact on our ability to sleep, and actually postmenopausal women are higher risk of getting insomnia. I suppose any kind of change in life brings and it has an impact on our sleep ability, but also with the hot flashes and that, temperature plays a huge role in the sleep-wake cycle. So again, that whole rhythm is out of sync as well. So it's confusing the body, you know. In order for sleep loves low temperatures, and we have this kind of a drop in our core body temperature should be at the highest around 8 o'clock in the evening, and then it starts to dip rapidly. And sleep and low body temperature it goes hand in hand. So if there's any little increase, even a tiny little increase in core body temperature, that sends a signal to the body that it should be awake. So exactly the same within this, what we call this cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. All of these techniques are exactly the same. And again, it's like, okay, the postmenopausal women, they're awake. There's no point in getting back into bed if they're not sleepy.
Yeah.
You know, it's harder to fall asleep if that sleep pressure is not there.
Yeah.
They may be kind of, okay, your sleep is interrupted. You're going to be frustrated. You know, if you've had to get up and change beds and, you know, the bed sheets and change the clothes and everything, you're going to be probably wide awake after that, you know. So you're better off, go off, read a book in a dim light. You know, you might only be there for 5 or 10 minutes and you start to feel sleepy again. But you're much more likely to get back to sleep. And I suppose people kind of have this fear that, oh, if I have to get up and out of bed, I definitely won't sleep then. But you're actually much more likely to feel sleepy in a more kind of relaxed situation.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, if you get up and you change the night and you do all that and you are really sleepy, it's absolutely fine to get back into bed. But it's about recognizing that, am I sleepy enough? That's always the question to ask yourself.
Well, one of the things that I find tends to work really well, and it's kind of, it's going against the grain, but I definitely find that it works well, is that we think that if we're going to have night sweats, that a little skimpy night dress will be better for us. But actually, I have found if you wear a long sleeve cotton night dress or pajamas or whatever, generally a night dress is the preference, that actually you won't wake up as much because it absorbs your perspiration quicker and it won't disturb you as much. So it's one thing that I found with a lot of women have tried that and found it's worked for them. So just to mention that. But just in terms of you know, more in terms of, you know, setting up a good routine for sleep, is there other steps you'd recommend for people?
I suppose you have to look at the bedroom environment as well, because the environment in which you sleep plays a huge role in our ability to sleep well or not to sleep well.
Yeah.
So we have to get back to the very, very basics. Beds are for sleeping in, you know. We shouldn't really be watching the TV for hours and hours in bed. We shouldn't be working in the bed on the laptop. It's all about getting a nice, quiet, relaxed environment, eliminating noise, ensuring temperature, cool bedroom, but also ensuring that we completely eliminate light. And particularly at this time of year, a nice bright morning, it's bright about from 4 o'clock onwards. And even no matter how good a quality curtains you have, your room will still be bright, you know. And that's the biggest cue for your body to wake up, because your melatonin levels are no longer being produced. So and remember, at that stage of at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be in a lighter stage of sleep anyway. And the lighter stage of sleep you're in, the more likely it is, or the easier it is to actually wake you up. Okay, so things like even maybe a good eye mask that will really block out the light, or blackout blinds. Portable blackout blinds are great. So you make sure that room, you have optimum conditions in that room for sleep, and light is a huge one. But make sure upon when you wake up, you get a bright light on. So you open the curtains. If it's winter time, you get that light on, and because again, that helps to give the body a sense of time and say, look, it's morning, you should be awake.
And that's too in terms of you know, when it comes to exercise and so forth. Like, I think if you can get out in the morning is the best time of day, isn't it, in terms of trying to get
exercise is brilliant, and earlier on in the day. There's been loads of studies that shows that exercise earlier in the day also helps to stabilize that body clock along with the bright light exposure. But outside exercise is brilliant, because you're getting out, you're getting exposure to the natural daylight. And because a lot of us now, well, not so much now these days, but we're all being exposed to far too much artificial light, and that's playing havoc with our body clock, you know. So even to get out, get any bit of exercise at all earlier on in the day, natural light exposure, It's brilliant. Yeah,
Brilliant.
definitely recommend that.
And just in terms then, so say everyone, say someone is following all of, the tips and the routine you've mentioned there, and they would like to try a CBT resource. Is there something they can try at home, or what's the recommendation there?
Yeah, the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, this is a specific program that was designed just targeting the insomnia. So it's 4 treatment sessions that I would do. Now, I'll be honest, access to this is extremely limited. There's only 3 of us in the whole country that's actually trained up in this. So it's really, really limited.
Okay.
I am doing now with, I suppose the one thing about the whole pandemic is it's changed the way everyone has worked, including me. So I would have done a clinic 1 day a week in Dublin and 1 day a week in Cavan. I'm doing everything now online, which means I'm working the 5 days a week. But everybody's having so many problems now with sleep because of this whole COVID thing. So it's 4 treatment sessions that's done online. But I think the important thing is, and I've been involved in sleep disorders for over 15 years, but I won't see a patient without a GP referral, because to getting a proper diagnosis is crucial if you're having a problem with sleep. Because a lot of the sleep disorders can have the same, can mimic each other. You can have the awakenings during the night, waking up feeling unrefreshed. And that's, can be the symptoms of loads of sleep disorders. And particularly if you live on your own, because you don't really know what's happening. Sometimes, and particularly with obstructive sleep apnea, where people are kind of stopping breathing during their sleep. The patient doesn't know. It's really the bed partner that actually notices it. So I think getting a proper, if you're trying all the sleep hygiene and you're doing all of these things, and you're not, the caffeine and all that, you're limited caffeine, you're doing all the right things, and you're still not sleeping well, you do most likely have some kind of a sleep disorder. So you need to talk to your GP and get some kind of a diagnosis. If it's insomnia, the GP can diagnose you on your clinical symptoms. If it's not insomnia, you are more than likely, you will have to get a referral to a sleep consultant with the view of going in to have an overnight sleep study to analyze your sleep to see exactly what's happening. Because there's over 80 sleep disorders.
Do you do the overnight sleep study, or is that done in one?
That's done. There's a couple of hospitals around the country that do that, and there's more and more sleep consultants. So the GP will know anyway, depending on where you're based. Fortunately, again, there can be quite a waiting list, because sleep is not prioritised in the hospital system, so that's the thing as well. And it's frustrating, because if you treat the sleep disorder, down the line, you're preventing a lot of other stuff that's coming down the line, so that's a frustrating thing,
And I think particularly, with like the neurological side of it, as you mentioned earlier, it isn't just dementia and Alzheimer's, it's so much more. So getting our sleep right is crucial. I mean, after I'm definitely going back to my 7 a.m. because I have slipped out, so I'm slipping by half an hour or something. But I
think we've all slipped over the last couple of months.
and Breege, just in terms of anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge fan of magnesium, and I would take that a lot I take it after, if I've gone for a run, and, for sleep and so forth. What are your thoughts on, things over the counter, supplements, medicines that you can take? And I guess another question is melatonin helpful? Is it something that's, worth looking at? So just wondering your thoughts on that.
Okay. The first thing I will say to you is the magnesium is there has been reports, that and there are studies to back that up as well. So magnesium is probably one of the better ones that I'd be taking.
Well, sorry, just on that, just to mention, anyone who follows me knows there's so many different forms of magnesium out there. You have to make sure it's the right form. So, I would say look at any of the blogs I've written on that, because, that's key.
Yeah, and that's with all the over-the-counter medications as well, like with the melatonin, for example. In Ireland, you can only get melatonin on prescription. You can't get it over the counter. Now, if you go to some of the other European countries and the States, you can get it.
Right.
Melatonin, there's very strict guidelines for prescribing it here in Ireland, but a lot of us do pick it up when we're abroad and we think we're having a bad night's sleep and we pop the melatonin pill. Melatonin is not indicated for the treatment of insomnia. Melatonin is more used for jet lag, for example, where, you know, the body clock is stable but it's just been pushed out by a couple of hours. So it's to kind of bring everything back. But it's a difficult drug to get right because the timing is crucial. But as I said, it's probably, again, for long-term use, again, I wouldn't indicate it, and certainly not, you know, over-the-counter stuff. Again, you don't know exactly what you're getting, you know. I was in the States and I went into this really kind of cheap place called Dollar Tree, and they were selling the melatonin for $1.
God.
I don't know what was in that. I did buy it and I did take it when I came home, but it didn't do me any use. I just went through and suffered the jet lag. So, you know, you have to be careful. I think a lot of this over-the-counter medication, people feel because I don't have to get it on prescription, it's okay to take it.
Right.
But they're not, especially if you're on other medications, you always make sure you talk to your pharmacist or your GP, because these can have interactions with the medications you're already on. Also, remember that the sleep aid industry is worth billions and billions of dollars. Yeah. And when people are not sleeping well, they are willing to try anything. Okay, yeah. And of course it's going to be portrayed, yeah, take this for a night. And I know even since on the TV, all the sleep aids that they're saying, you know, is always been advertised on the telly. A lot of those have what we call antihistamines in them, and they do have a sedative nature, and they're fine for a couple of nights. But really, they're not long-term. You shouldn't have to rely on any kind of a sleep aid in order to have a good night's sleep.
Okay.
And you may read research, but a lot of these research might be just done on, you know, a small number, cohort of people, or over a short amount of time. There's no kind of long-term studies on these, but just be careful. Look, if you're not on any medication and you're taking it, it's not doing you any harm, by all means take it. But definitely magnesium would be one of the more recommended ones. The other ones, short-term use, and just check with your pharmacist if you're on other medication. But they tend not to work long-term.
Okay. You know? I know Melissa Dream is another good one. It's a herb, and
yes.
Ingredients in it as well, but again, something like that would not long term. It would be
exactly, and particularly I know the Melissa Dream one. If you have thyroid problems and you're on thyroid medication, that's one to kind of maybe avoid.
Right. Okay.
Again, but this is showing that you just check with your pharmacist. Say, look, I'm on this, and the pharmacist will have a good idea, you know, of what they interact with the meds.
Okay, brilliant, Breege. We're all going to be sleeping fantastic tonight. Any final tips or anything final you'd like to mention?
The one thing I would say is, you know what, if you have a bad night's sleep, don't panic about it, you know. The body is great at compensating for a couple of, it adjusts that whole natural pattern, you know, to compensate the fact that you're sleep deprived. So don't panic, because the more you panic about it, the more likely you're not going to sleep. Just say, look, I don't sleep tonight, you know what? You're more likely to sleep better tomorrow night because the need for sleep will be there. Yeah. Try to avoid naps before bed. You know, when you're nice and relaxed and you're watching the TV and you're nodding off, and you might have a little, even a micro sleep, and then you get into bed and then you're wide awake. And you're like, but I can't understand. I'm falling asleep now half an hour ago and now I can't sleep. You've now ate into that sleep debt. So the body is great at grabbing little bits of sleep just to keep fueling it, to keep it going.
Right, okay.
So try to have that routine. Routine is essential. Avoid the napping, particularly in the run up to bedtime. What else do I want to say about sleep? Look, if you're doing all the right things and you're still not happy with the way you're sleeping, speak to your GP. There may be an underlying sleep disorder there. And the other important thing is, the other thing we need to get away from the train of thought is, not everybody needs 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah, that's another whole conversation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's the amount of sleep you need on a consistent basis to make you feel refreshed the next day.
Okay. It's a
So
bit like going back to
yeah, yeah,
the phone. Don't you have to go
exactly.
by your
Yeah.
body? You have
It's
to.
not about, when it comes to sleep, it's not about hours.
Yeah.
We have to focus on the quality of sleep first,
Yeah.
and then you look at the amount of hours. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I had a patient just the other week saying he rang up in a terrible state. He was only getting by in maybe 5-6 hours sleep a night. I was like, I'm going to end up with all these awful, problems down the line.
Yeah.
But he was highly functioning. Like, he didn't need my help at all.
Yeah.
But just there's this idea, if you're not getting your 8 hours sleep, you're
Yeah.
going to be in trouble.
We've been kind of reared on that, haven't we? That
Yeah.
it's, and I would probably say for the vast majority probably benefit or work off of 8 hours,
Yeah.
don't they?
Yeah. You see, the guidelines is like, for adults, we need anywhere between 6 and 10 hours sleep. You have to find out where you fall between those.
Yeah.
Now, there's a small percentage, but a very, very small percentage that can get by on less than 6 hours,
Yeah.
So it's a very, very small percentage.
Okay. This is brilliant, Breege. We'll do an Instagram live, I think soon enough,
Yes, good.
to chat more about this.
Well, look, we all can relate to sleep. We all do it. So we all have an odd bad night as well. So we can all relate to being a little bit sleep deprived.
Okay. Great. Okay. Hopefully everyone enjoyed that, and more interviews to come during the week. And I will do a post over the next few days just with Breege's details and so forth. Okay. Thank you.